The throne room of Zatheron stretched across 300 meters of polished obsidian, its vaulted ceiling lost in artificial darkness that mimicked the void of space. Emperor Vokthar the Undying sat upon his celestial throne, his forearms adorned with the conquest rings of 17 fallen civilizations. Before him knelt the representatives of 1,000 worlds, their heads bowed in submission, all except two. Hannah stood with her arms crossed, her worn leather jacket looking absurdly out of place among the flowing robes and ceremonial armor of the assembled dignitaries. Beside her, Leonardo leaned casually against a pillar, examining his fingernails with apparent boredom. The human delegates had been summoned to accept Earth's surrender, after the Zatheran armada had positioned itself at the edge of their solar system. "You dare stand in my presence?" Vokthar's voice rumbled like collapsing stars, amplified by the acoustics of his throne room. His primary hands gripped the armrests of his throne while his secondary hands reached for the ceremonial blade at his side. The World Breaker, forged from the core of a dying star. Hannah tilted her head, studying the Emperor with the analytical gaze of someone examining a particularly interesting insect. "Yeah, our knees don't really bend that way. Genetic thing. You know how evolution is." A collective gasp rippled through the assembled aliens. The Counselor of Proxima, a gelatinous being who had witnessed 3 millennia of galactic politics, actually quivered in fear. No one spoke to the Emperor with such casual disrespect. Leonardo pushed off from the pillar, straightening his collar. "What my colleague means, Your Majesty, is that we received your terms. Unconditional surrender, complete disarmament, and integration into your empire as a servitor species." He paused, pulling out a small data pad from his pocket. "We had our legal team look it over. They found it lacking. Vokthar rose from his throne, his 4-meter frame towering over the assembly. The Worldbreaker hummed to life in his grip, its blade glowing with contained fusion energy. "Your primitive world possesses exactly 7 combat-capable vessels. My armada numbers in the thousands. Your weapons are chemical propellants and crude missiles. Mine can crack planets. What part of your situation suggests you have negotiating power?" Hannah's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The part where you're still talking instead of attacking." The Emperor descended the steps of his dais, each footfall echoing through the chamber like a judge's gavel. The assembled delegates scrambled aside, creating a path. Some of the more fragile species had already fainted from proximity to his battle aura, the psychic pressure that had broken the will of countless warriors. Hannah and Leonardo didn't move. "I have conquered species who could manipulate gravity with thought," Vokthar growled, stopping 3 meters from the humans. "I have enslaved beings who lived in the hearts of stars. I have broken empires that spanned galaxies before your ancestors learned to make fire. What makes you think your backwards planet deserves anything but complete subjugation?" "Because," Leonardo said, adjusting his glasses, "you made a fundamental error in your intelligence gathering." "Impossible. The Zatheran intelligence network is perfect." "Almost perfect," Hannah corrected. "You cataloged our military capabilities, our technological level, our population distribution. Very thorough. Gold star effort." She took a step forward, and for the first time Vokthar saw something in her eyes that made his centuries-old combat instincts whisper warnings. "But you forgot to ask the most important question." The Emperor raised the Worldbreaker, pointing its blazing tip at Hannah's throat. The heat should have been unbearable. The blade's edge existed at temperatures that could sublimate tungsten. Hannah's jacket didn't even singe. "And what question is that, insect?" She tilted her head again, that analytical expression never wavering. "Why a species that's only had spaceflight for 70 years managed to intercept and decode your secure communications from 17 light-years away. Why we knew the exact composition of your armada before it left Zatheron. Why we're not terrified right now." Vokthar's eyes narrowed. "Bluff, human bravado. Your species is known for its irrational confidence." "Is it a bluff?" Leonardo asked mildly. He tapped his data pad, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the throne room. It showed the Zatheran armada in perfect detail, every ship, every weapon placement, every shield generator. But there was something else in the display. Tiny markers, thousands of them, scattered throughout the fleet. "What is this?" Vokthar demanded. "Those are human-manufactured neural disruptors," Hannah explained. "Nanoscale. We seeded them in your fuel supplies about 6 months ago. Wonderful thing about a galaxy-spanning empire. Lots of trade routes, lots of shipping lanes, lots of opportunities for contamination. The Emperor's four hands clenched. "You're lying," Leonardo sighed. "We really aren't. See, while you were busy cataloging our missile silos and counting our battleships, we were doing what humans do best. We were adapting, learning, exploiting weaknesses." He looked up at the massive alien. "You know what the funny thing is? We studied your species, the Zatheran. You're biologically remarkable. 4 arms, redundant nervous system, psychic abilities, impressive. But your technology, your actual engineering, it's 14,000 years old, barely changed. Our technology is perfected. Your technology is stagnant," Hannah interrupted. "You conquered your way across the galaxy using the same playbook for millennia. Overwhelm with numbers, break their will with fear, absorb their worlds into your empire. It worked great against everyone else." She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes, cold and calculating. "But humans? We've been fighting each other since we could pick up rocks. We've been innovating, evolving, changing our tactics every generation. We went from horse-drawn carriages to spacecraft in a single century. What have you changed in the last 10,000 years? Vokthar's blade wavered. For the first time in 300 years. The Emperor felt something he'd almost forgotten. Uncertainty. "Here's what's going to happen," Leonardo said, his casual tone contrasting sharply with his words. "You're going to withdraw your armada from our solar system. You're going to leave humanity alone, not as your servants, not as your subjects, but as equals. And in exchange, we won't activate those neural disruptors and turn your magnificent fleet into the galaxy's most expensive collection of debris." "This is extortion." "This is diplomacy," Hannah corrected. "Humanity isn't interested in conquering the galaxy. We've got enough problems at home. But we're also not interested in kneeling." She met the Emperor's gaze without flinching. "So here's my question for you, Your Majesty. Do you want to be remembered as the Emperor who finally met his match? Or as the fool who lost his entire armada because he couldn't recognize when someone was offering him a way out?" The throne room was silent. Every delegate, every guard, every sensor was focused on the Emperor and the 2 humans who had somehow turned a surrender ceremony into a negotiation. Slowly, Vokthar lowered the world breaker. "You would have made excellent Zatheran," he said quietly. Hannah's tilted her head one final time. "Wrong move, Majesty. We're better as humans." The Emperor turned and walked back to his throne. As he sat, he activated his command console with one hand while raising another in a gesture his species reserved for worthy opponents. "Armada Command," he spoke into the void. "Begin withdrawal from Sol system. Log the humans as independent entities. Hostile approach protocols are now in effect." As the humans turned to leave, Leonardo glanced back. "Oh, and Your Majesty, those neural disruptors? Completely fictional. We made them up," he grinned. "But the fact that you believed us? That's the real difference between your species and ours. We've learned to weaponize uncertainty." They walked out of the throne room, leaving behind a stunned galactic empire and an emperor who, for the first time in centuries, realized that the universe still had the capacity to surprise him. Behind them, Vokthar the Undying allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Perhaps conquering humanity wouldn't have been the victory he'd assumed. Perhaps, just perhaps, these strange, adaptable, terrifyingly creative creatures would make far better allies, or at the very least, far more interesting adversaries. The end.